In this video, I'll go over some of the questions that you should ask prior to going into your job interview. Hello, I'm Anthony Llewellyn. I'm the career doctor. I'm here to help you manage your medical career. So I've been doing a lot of interview coaching lately. It's been a bit of a peak period for that. And one question that I find that I'm often being asked at the end of an interview coaching program by a candidate is there anything I should be asking about before the interview? So there are definitely a number of key questions that you should be getting the answers to prior to going into your job interview. For some of these questions, you should be seeking the answer from the person coordinating the recruitment episode. And for some of these questions, you should be seeking the answer from yourself and perhaps another expert like a coach that you're employing. So let's go into that in detail. So let's start with questions that you should be asking of the person who's organising the recruitment. So I always recommend, if possible, that you check in with the person coordinating the recruitment a few days ahead of the actual interview day. Some recruitment coordinators are very organised in providing you lots of information about the process, but more often than not, you can find out more information just by being a little bit more courteous and proactive and respectful. Remember also that this person who's coordinating the interview process is also often something like an executive assistant who works for the chair of the panel. So it helps to be making a good impression with this person because panel chairs often do ask the secretaries and executive assistants whether the candidates were polite and respectful to them, and that goes a long way. So the first thing to do is confirm the details of your interview. Make sure that you confirm the date and time and locations of your interview because sometimes these can be wrong or they can change, especially when an interview might be being done across time zones, say a video interview where you're in one country and they're in another. Also ask the question about how early you should arrive. Is there, for example, some paperwork that needs to be done before you go into the interview, or sometimes with interviews you need to get there a bit early because they'll give you the questions beforehand. Find out about the names of the panel members. I think this is probably one of the most important questions to ask about going into your interview. Quite often interview panels are being pulled together at the last minute, so checking a couple of days beforehand is usually the best time to be able to find out the final composition of the panel. It's very difficult, if not impossible, certainly I've never managed to do it, to remember the names of the interview panel members when you're introduced to them in the room. It's just such a stressful time walking to that interview room. You get introduced to their names, you shake their hands, but it just completely washes over you. So if you can, it's really helpful to find out the names beforehand. Also find out their positions and what they do. What is their role? What is their profession? What are their interests? This will help you tailor your interview responses effectively and also might help you avoid making faux pas by talking over the top of someone or not explaining a technical term appropriately or not showing a lot of respect for other members of the team. Ask about the length of the interview and how many questions will there be in total. This will help you to know how long or short your answers need to be during the interview. Ask if there's anything you should be preparing for the interview. Some interview processes involve getting you to do a presentation beforehand as the first question, or coming in early to review the questions. So it's good to know about these things as early as possible so you can get a bit of a head start on them. Is there anything you should bring for the interview? The interview is often the time when panels will want to view your credentials, your degrees, your 100 points of identification and other documents like working with children checks. You should also ask if it's okay to bring things with you to the interview. I always like to bring a portfolio of things to look at and refer to during the interview, and I'll leave a link about a video that I made about that here or here somewhere so you can go watch that if that's of interest to you. I find particularly having the job selection criteria in front of me can be very helpful because you can refer to them during the interview and they can help to guide you to think about what particular questions might be getting at. How many candidates are being interviewed? You may think that this is a question where you're unlikely to get a response, but reviewers and interview panels can be surprisingly candid about these sorts of questions, and it certainly helps to know your chances going in. If it's a position with multiple openings, try to also find out how many people the panel is looking to hire. If the interview is a video interview, you should definitely ask if it's possible to do a test run beforehand. Many interviews these days are conducted using video. Usually you're asked to go to a link on the web and use a browser from your own computer. So it's a good idea to find out the details about the system being used beforehand, and if possible, test it out on your own setup to make sure there's no firewall preventing you using it, or it's blocked for some other reason, or you've got an issue around connecting because you just don't have enough bandwidth where you are. I mentioned that there are a number of questions you should be asking yourself about before going into the interview, so let's go into them now. The first question I think you need to be asking yourself is, do I understand what they are looking for? It may seem obvious, but between lodging that application for the job and doing all that preparation for the interview, you may have actually forgotten exactly what it is that the panel is looking for. So reviewing the selection criteria that came with the job description and checking out the role statements and the key responsibilities is a really good idea at this stage. Make sure that you understand what the key competencies are that they're looking for, so you can talk about how your own competencies demonstrate that you are a good candidate. Ask yourself, can I paint a compelling picture of why I am the best person for the job? Most panel interviews start with a question along the lines of, why have you applied for the job, or what makes you a good candidate? Make sure that you have an answer to this particular question. What are the 3 key strengths that you bring that not only meet but exceed their expectations? Use examples and storytelling to paint a compelling picture for them. Have you anticipated any key weaknesses? The panel will not just be interested in any strengths you may bring to the role, they will be interested in areas of weakness. Overall, they will generally be cautious about giving someone who has a significant weakness the role, even if that's balanced out by some significant strengths. So it's important that you've honestly considered whether you are truly weak in any particular area that's key to the job, and that you have a plan for addressing this weakness. So for example, if the role calls for you to conduct research as part of the position, but you've not done any real research, then you need to be prepared to talk about how you have other skills that would translate into being able to do this requirement and mean that you would not necessarily be starting from scratch. Have you thought about the questions they will ask? If you've been doing interview practice, you probably have been thinking about what questions will be asked. But be careful that you are not just practicing old questions that you've inherited that are based on outdated selection criteria. Go through and review those criteria and make sure you are answering questions related to them. If you've not done any interview preparation at this point, and you should have been, you should at least be going through the position description and in particular the selection criteria and coming up with at least one question for each of these. I generally recommend coming up with an example-based question and a more theoretical question for each selection criteria and making sure that you can answer these. Have you talked to current incumbents? A commonly overlooked and easy thing to do in your preparation is to actually talk to the actual people that are doing the actual job that you are going for. These people can give you all sorts of insights into the role. And phrases like, well, when I was talking to one of the current doctors working in the role and they mentioned some of the key challenges in the first month will go a long way with the panel, because it shows that you've done your research and you know what the job's actually about. Current incumbents can also often give you vital insights into the actual selection process. Do you know what questions you need to ask? Perhaps the final thing to think about before you go into that interview is whether you have any burning questions about the job that need answering. There's normally a period at the end of the interview when the official questions are over and when the panel hands it over to you to ask your questions. It's important that you don't blow the interview by asking a question which you could have easily found out the answer for, or which doesn't show that you've put in a lot of research. On the other hand, asking a really insightful question can finish off the process on a high. It's best to have prepared these questions beforehand, however, and not try to wing it on the day. Again, I've done a bit of a video about that, and I'll leave a link up here or here so you can watch it if you're interested. So there you go, a number of questions you should be asking before you go into your actual job interview. What about you? Do you have any burning questions about the job interview process, ones that I may not have answered in this video? If so, leave a comment below. And if you like this video, leave me a like. Think about subscribing and turning on notifications, and I will see you in the next video.